What's up, everybody? My name is CoalFire, and welcome to a museum of dubious splendor. So, as far as I can tell, this is gonna be a lot of reading and some intermittent walking simulator. But it looked like it had a really cool premise, and I think it opens up with the blurb from... yeah, here it is. The following work is an adaptation of a collection of stories written by the Gujarati poet Mir Umar Hassan. These stories, entitled In Dubious Splendor, were written in 1960 for the Malwa Chronicle, but were mangled and edited without the author's permission prior to their publication in serialized form. The collection became momentarily infamous as the subject of the first court case to arbitrate authorial ownership in independent India. Even today, despite countless restorative efforts by scholars, it cannot be said with any certainty that the text we used for this adaptation was the original as written by Umar Hassan. So, I really don't know anything about Indian culture. I don't know anything about authorial ownership law, but I thought this looked like a really cool collection of short stories and interesting artwork, and I wanted to dive in, learn a little bit more about it. So it's going to be a lot of reading, it's going to be a little bit of walking, so if that's not your thing, then please see yourselves out. The rest of you, let's go on a little adventure. Okay. Is this... oh, hey there. Is this Hindi? I don't know. Yeah, we're leaving this room. Peter Gregory Cantor was a prolific traveler, the founder of the doctrine of the anthropologist, and treasurer at the Royal Academy. Cantor was known to all civilized world as an authority on the peoples and customs of Hindustan. But even the all-knowing Cantor was bewildered by the Apparatus, an object that he wrote parsimoniously about in his annals, and later alluded to with deep regret in the journal that he maintained upon his return to England. The apparatus, as Cantor first described it in his book of travels, has no apparent purpose. It was a tubular object of indeterminate shape, found in the living spaces of the people of Danta, often small enough to be placed in an almirah. Sorry, there's a lot of words that I'm not going to recognize in this. The apparatus seemed to be commonplace to the people using it, that Cantor could not ask what it was without crippling damage to his credibility as a member of a superior race, as he believed himself to be. That it was man-made and not a creation of nature was but evident, and Cantor made specific mention of its artifice. But beyond that record, nothing else was written about its shape or material, its color or form, or its intended purpose or providence. Cantor was also so startled by its presence that he did not even name it, and that he only called it the apparatus whenever he made scant mention of its presence in his annals. It seems that in his fascination with the object had not gone unnoticed, and in that act of spontaneous diplomacy, the Raja of Setarvan, the province that Cantor was touring, presented with him with one of these mysterious objects. But the gift only served to torment Cantor, who found the apparatus a constant reminder of his bewilderment and failure as a man of knowledge, for he had never worked up the courage to ask what it was. Cantor kept the apparatus at his home in Rellington, and made provisions in his will to have it displayed at the museum after his passing, hoping somebody might shed light upon its mysteries, and to this day, a replica of the apparatus can be found on display, waiting for somebody to identify what Cantor never could. Is it a tube of toothpaste? Cantor was a philosopher and theologian, wasn't he? I feel like I remember reading some of his works in, some of my philosophy classes in college. But yeah, this is what the game is. It's a story followed by a display. And I'm not sure if the displays are like supposed to be satirical or comical, or if they truly are what they're supposed to be. But that's a Tuba Toothpaste. It even says strengthens teeth, freshens breath upon it. Alright. We go right or left? Let's go into this one. Leave. Oh, there's the logo for the game. In the land between Karatush Plateau and the mountains of Hindu Kush, there lived a pasha called Vokud, surrounded by desert on 3 sides and by unforgiving cliffs on the other. The kingdom of Uokri, which Vokud Pasha was the ruler, was an inhospitable place, and yet its harsh land and the capital of Uokri was a magnificent town, full of gilded minarets and soft shade-laden streets. Such wealth in the desert en route, the raiding trails provided an irresistible temptation for many a warlord. But Pasha Vokud managed to keep the invaders at bay. This difficult task was in no small part made possible by the Guild of the Desert Scouts that the Pasha had trained and commissioned. Under the tutelage of his chief military officer, a thin, nervous general called Sinia Humur, several runners were hired and trained to run across the desert sands and chart the shifting landscape every day. With their feet clad in coarse cotton and salves applied to their forehead, these runners would maintain a constant and current repository of the ever-changing desert. They would record the positions of the waterholes and the dunes of the treacherous sand. They would note where the top layers of mud had dried, soon leaving a quagmire below where camels could cross. And so, with their endless running, they preserved for the Pasha and his army countless routes of attack and retreat that were used to repel and harry invaders, and also launch many a successful plunder of the neighboring kingdoms. While the guides were well used to the desert, air, and heat, they could never protect their feet, for the hot sand and salt soon eroded everything. The younger scouts could bear their blisters very well, but as they got older, they took to carpentry or tanning, leaving their post with a royal pension. Each one of them retired after a few years, everyone except Ibu, the legendary runner, who had been guiding the Pasha and his armies for centuries. Without a blister on his feet while traversing the desert, Ibu's feet, through some miracle, had turned to as stiff and hide-like as so to bear the rough sands with eroding salt, and he continued to sprint across the burning landscape with the abandon of a youth. When Ibu died in his 673rd year of service, Pasha decreed that Ibu's feet be preserved in honor of his exceptional service and capability. It is a replica of these feet that are displayed here at the museum. It's a pair of shoes. Oh, goodness. I like what's going on here. It's these like long-winded and passionate writings about something really, really obscure, and then it follows up with the thing that's in the museum, which is just an absolutely normal, everyday item. That's funny. First it was a tube of toothpaste, and now it's a pair of shoes. Let's do one more for this video. I definitely want to come back and do some more of this, but I think it's going to be something done better over several sessions, because I have a feeling there's a lot going on in this game. So let's go... Are these the same? They do not look it. Oh, those are the same. And these are the same. So there's 2 doors here, really. Let's try this one. Oh? There was no story with this one. So it's just a bunch of water faucets and little boats. Okay. Let's, I don't know what these signify. I'm not even sure what language that is. I think it's Hindi, but I'm not completely confident about that. A long time ago, when the mountains could still remember their names, and the monkey gods ruled the sky, a grand feast was held atop the Grubata Purbat. Here, in celebration of their victory over demons, the monkey gods feasted on apples harvested from the clouds, for that was their sole fruit permitted to them. But even when every god had eaten, they saw to utter consternation that there was still one apple left. Being gods and not demons, these reasonable divine monkeys came to the conclusion that the apple ought to be divided equally, so that every god may have an equal share. Glad to have arrived at this solution, the monkey gods smirked to themselves and slapped each other's backs. But when a mischief maker asked, "And what shall we cut it with?" the gods' faces fell as they resumed their morose pondering until somebody declared, "Summon Ibu the blacksmith." Ibu was a giant, and it took him less than a blink of an eye to walk across the 3 realms to the gods. He listened dutifully to the chief amongst the monkey gods and nodded sagely at the request for a tool to divide the apple with. Then, bowing his head low, rushed back to his workshop. In 10 days, Ibu returned to the monkey gods, beaming with pride at his new creation, a magnificent ray of light that stretched from infinity to infinity. The gods looked at him with some uneasiness. One of them tried to lift it and failed. Another tried in vain. And when all the gods failed to budge this piercing beam, they turned to Ibu and pleaded with him to make a smaller tool, that it might use it with some ease. And so Ibu made his way back to the workshop, and after 10 years returned again with his gleaming new invention, a shard of lightning. The gods tried their best to heft this dazzling creation, but failed yet again. The lightning singed their coats, leaving black, unsightly streaks along some of their hands and faces. Ibu returned to his workshop, and yet again, after another interminable decade of work, he approached the gods with his newest innovation, a splendid ivory tusk, carved and honed to perfection. Again, the gods tried to lift it, but found they could not do so, with also having to lift the elephant that had somehow attached itself to the other hand. Much disheartened, Ibu took his rarest materials and tools and set out to craft the perfect Yantra. For 100 years and 100 moons, he worked on making it small enough for the gods to handle, but in his haste, it slipped from his hands and through his floorboards. Ibu bit his tongue and watched with horror as he saw it fall to earth. Ibu returned to the monkey gods to apologize profusely, but he saw that the gods had already left the feast, leaving their undivided apple for Ibu as payment. It is Ibu's lost yantra that is shown at this museum in a magnificent sculptural form, commissioned by Maharaj Dar Singh. A knife. Oh man, I really like this. I really like this. Just the form of storytelling that's going on in, like, playing up all of these inventions that we so take for granted and are just simple objects in everyday life. But the story behind it, these, like, fictional works, are so well written and convincing and draw upon so many different, like, writing styles and people, and I absolutely love it. It's a freaking knife. And there was just a 2-page story that took hundreds of years on the creation of this. Oh, I really like this. I know it's just walking around a room and reading big blocks of text, but I don't know, there's something about the presentation and the way that the artwork works with the music and the writing. It's just fantastic. But I'm gonna leave this episode here and come back to it in a little bit, because I have no idea how many stories are in this. I have no idea how many rooms, but I'm really interested in seeing everything that this has to offer, all of the different stories. Oh, I hope you guys enjoyed this as much as I did, and that I did a good job editing out all of my awful mispronunciations and ridiculously long pauses as I figured out how to pronounce some of those words. But until the next one, thank you so much for watching. My name is CoalFire, and I will see you next time.